Welcome to the world headquarters of Andy Crawford Photography. Today I thought I'd take some time to walk you through how I have processed an image that I took this weekend while I was actually out fishing. I had a buddy who wanted to go fishing, and I almost left my equipment at home, and at the last minute I just couldn't bring myself to. I like to have it on hand pretty much whenever I'm out and about, just in case something happens, and this is one of those times where everything just worked out perfectly. We were in the marshes south of Houma, Louisiana, and we were in a pond, and the overcast was really thick. It didn't look like the sunrise was going to be much at all to speak of, and then about 5:40 the sun hit a spot in the cloud cover that just was perfect, and as soon as I saw it, I knew that I had a winning photo. I knew I wanted to have a sunburst where the sun was, and just show that beautiful green marsh in the water, and just sort of illustrate what gets me out and about. And so before we get into it, let me just point out that the starburst that you're going to see is created within the camera. It is not a filter. It's not created in Photoshop. It is a technique that I've learned that creates that starburst really with any light, and the sun is just perfect for it. So let's move over to the computer and see how I came up with this image. Okay, so you are looking at the finished image on my computer. You can see that it is at Andy Crawford Photography, and my gallery is at gallery.andycrawford.photography. And I named it Morning Star because we've got this beautiful, beautiful starburst effect on the sun. So that's the finished image. So how did I come up with that? Well, let's jump into Lightroom. All of my workflow begins in Lightroom. So I have imported all of the images I took, and you can see that I took a lot of images. I took some that are, you know, nicely exposed in terms of being able to see the grasses and all that stuff. I took a lot of images that were underexposed. That's the whole key to that sunburst. The sun is extremely bright, and so you want to have a small aperture and underexposed so that it doesn't allow that sun to really blow out. And as you can see on this particular image, it created that really nice starburst. My settings at this point were 2/50th of a second at f11. f11 to f16 gives you a really good starburst. The actual images that I chose to use are right here. Okay. Now, this is an example of when HDR processing comes into play. A lot of times HDR is overused. I've overused it sometimes. Sometimes it's overused to great effect, and it works. But I've gotten to where I don't use it quite as much because the camera that I use, which is a Nikon 810, a D810, has a great dynamic range, and so I have discovered with this camera that I really don't have to use HDR as much. I can capture good information in the shadows as well as the highlights. However, in this image, the contrast between the sun and the marsh was just too great. As you can see, this one is really perfectly lighted for the grass. There's no detail up here. I mean, it's just blown out. You can't, all you see is a big glow where the sun should be. And so what I did is I set my camera to continuous mode, and I shot 3 or 4 or 5 images on a bracket setting. Now, HDR, often you're going to use more than a couple of frames. I've got 5 frames that are one stop apiece. In this image, I found that I didn't need to do that. I decided I was going to try to use these. And so all you do in Lightroom now is one of the great advances in Lightroom. It allows you to process for HDR right in Lightroom. There are times when Photoshop works better, but for the most part, Lightroom does a really, really fine job. And so I select both of those images. I come up here to Photo Merge and HDR. And while that's working, I use Lightroom for panoramics as well to stitch frames together. And it really does a fantastic job. Okay, there is our preview. Now, it is important to note that I make sure auto align is on, because it's going to look at all of those edges and do its best to line it up. And unless there's a lot of wind or something really weird's going on, it's really going to do a good job. These were handheld. Normally I'm on a tripod, but in this case I was in a boat, which would be moving around. And so I handheld it, and Photoshop still did a really good job of lining everything up. I usually set the deghosting amount on medium unless there's a lot of wind. If there's a lot of wind, a lot of times it's just not going to work anyway. But that deghosting is looking for components of the shot that have moved and make an allowance for that. If you click on here, you can see these clouds and this water. It looked at it and said, well, something moved there, and it made allowances for it, and you end up with these nice sharp pieces of the image. Okay, so all we have to do now is merge it. Okay, now we're back. It took a few minutes for that to get going and get all the pieces put together. Essentially what HDR does is takes the elements of each image that are properly exposed and combines them, makes a decision on how to composite the two images. And so it looked at that really dark, nice sky and that sunburst in this frame, and then the grass in this frame, and this is what it came up with. As you can see, it's already a pretty good image. You've got a really nice sunburst, starburst starting up here, but you've got some detail in the grass. It's just a little bit muted, so we're going to take care of that. So we're going to come over into the develop mode, and we're going to start our development. One of the tricks I've learned from a buddy named David Moorfield is when you're in the exposure or the development mode here, come under exposure, pull all of your highlights all the way to the left and your shadows to the right. That's a good starting point. And then you're going to want to make sure that you're not clipping anything off. If if your histogram up here looks like this, you're going to be blowing out your highlights. And so same thing on the shadows. And so the easy way to do that is hold down Option on the Mac, hold down Option. I believe it's Control for it's either Control or Alt for the PC, but hold down Option and then click on this tab, this slider, until you just start seeing something other than black. And that will tell you you've got a good white point. I think I'm going to go to right there. And then the same thing here is you're going to move it to the left until you get a few pieces of black showing up. And that's going to show you that you have good black points. All right, so it's already starting to look a little better. If we come here, that's our import, and there's our image at this point. I'm going to add a little bit of clarity, but I'm not going to add too much. Clarity helps give the impression of sharpening. It's not true sharpening, but it looks at the edges and just gives a little clarity to those edges. I'm going to move the saturation up a little bit to give us some better colors in the sunrise. Same thing with the vibrance. All right, now I'm going to skip down here to sharpening. Come down to the detail tab. This is where you're going to look and you can see that there is noise in there. I had to shoot this at ISO 800, and so there is some noise, even though the D810 does a great job of handling that noise. I want to get rid of that as much as possible. And so your luminance is how you're going to smooth out some of that digital noise. I am going to go to 30. And another trick that Dave Moreland showed me was when you choose your luminance value, you want to choose the value in the amount of sharpening that combined will equal 100. So in this case, I did 30 in luminance. I'm going to do 70 in sharpening, and that equals obviously 100. Radius should be about 1.4, and then your masking is going to dictate what in this frame is being sharpened. The black portions, when you hold down the option key and click on this, all of the black portions are not being sharpened. So you can see there's a lot of sharpening going on. I'm going to tone it down by moving to the right, because I don't really want to sharpen those clouds. I want to sharpen the grass up front, and I don't mind a little sharpening of some of the clouds in that starburst, but I don't want just a ton of sharpening. So you can see that is going to leave most of the clouds alone. It's going to leave a lot of this grass alone, which is out of focus anyway because of the depth of field. Okay, so that's that. Let's move up here to the saturation module. And you choose this little button right here, and it's just a picker is what it is, a color picker. And so you hold your mouse down, and if you watch the sliders under saturation, they're going to start moving as you move the mouse up. And if you can get really garish, or you can desaturate everything. Okay, so I'm looking to just pump up the colors a little bit. I don't want it to look fake, but I do want to give it some color. Give this grass a little bit of color. Whatever color you put your target on is going to be increased. If you go up with your mouse, if you go down, it'll be decreased. Let's see, and this is all eyeball. There's no real formula to this. I go until I like it, and I think I might have gone a little too much here. And then come to hue, and hue you can really sort of fine tune it, and I like that. I think it gives a little bit of that nice orange and yellow light to the grass, and you can even see it in this grass. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there, and at this point that's pretty much everything I'm going to do to it in Lightroom for the time being. I'm going to click back on there. Now then, do a right click and go in Edit and send it to Photoshop. The great thing about Lightroom is that it gives you the ability to do a lot of work to a photo that's non-destructive. It's just writing instructions, and then you can send it to your plugins. And Lightroom, in this instance, is simply another plugin. But it allows us to take care of a few issues. First, I am going to do my cropping, and this is another one of those issues that is an eyeball, as a personal preference issue. I want to create a bit of a panoramic, because I don't really care about all that sky, and I really don't care about all this water in front. And so I want the grass here and this sunburst to be the real focal points. So I'm going to create my panoramic. Go ahead and tell it to crop it. And there's your panoramic. I'm going to increase it to full size. That is Command 0. Okay. you see a couple of spots right here and a sun flare right there. Come here and get your clone or your healing brush and just paint over those. And those issues go away magically. It is one of the great tools that can be used. Now, I'm also going to use it. I've got some things that bother me. If you zoom in, you can see, I don't know what that is, but it bothers me. And so I can come in and I can get rid of any of those issues that I find. I don't want that piece of grass because it runs out of the frame and distracts me. And I am even going to get rid of this because I don't think it adds anything. Okay, I think that's going to be about it. All right, now that's really pretty much ready to go, except I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sharpen it. Now, I'm using another plugin called Nik Efex Pro. And it is simply a plugin that works off of Photoshop or Lightroom. In this case, I'm working it right out of Photoshop. When I hit output sharpening, which is a great sharpener, I'm going to choose the brush. It gives me that option. I could just hit OK and it'll sharpen the entire scene. But again, I don't want the entire scene to be sharpened. I'm just going to sharpen this grass, and I'm just doing this for, just to be quick, but I could actually go in and I've got a Wacom tablet that I can go on and I can draw in real fine lines that I want to sharpen. But in this case, I think we're good doing this. Okay, so if you look over here, when I chose output sharpening, it created a mask, and so the whole thing was black. Everything that I paint in turns white. That means the white means it's being applied to that area. So if you go in a little bit, you'll see it's sharpening, and it really probably over sharpened it. And so I'm going to move the opacity level to 80, and then apply. There's one more thing that I want to do because I think that sharpening introduced some noise into the area that I sharpened. Back in Nik Efex Pro, I'm going to choose strong noise. It's going to create another layer, again, complete black layer, so it's not applied anywhere. And when it comes up, I'm just going to paint over the area that I just sharpened, simply to take away a little bit of that noise. While that's working, while it's getting ready to do that, let me just point out that a lot of times, especially with these very high megapixel cameras that are producing huge files, you'll see noise on the screen that looks like it's going to ruin the shot. Most of the time when you print it, you won't even notice it. So just be aware of that. Now, if you look at this, as I paint over where I sharpened, it looks like it's taken all of the sharpening out of it. And then to some degree, it is removing some of that sharpening. That's partly what it's doing. So obviously, we don't want 100%. I'm going to put 25 in there, just so I can smooth out a little bit of that. Actually, I may go 15. And that is ready to go back into Lightroom. And so all you do to throw it back into Lightroom is, got to apply that. Now, save it, and okay, it's being saved in the background because it picked up as soon as I applied that. And it is going to, that's it right there. That is not it yet. Let's see, it's going to drop into Lightroom, and here it comes. Okay, there is our image. And it is pretty close to what I created initially. The only thing that I would do, this is something I hear Matt Klowski, which is a very difficult name to say, he says this all the time, that every image needs a little bit of vignette. And just a note on vignette, guys, a vignette can really enhance an image. If you saw that, it sort of darkens the edges, it makes that middle come out a little bit, and it really helps enhance the image. However, sometimes you'll see, and people will just get crazy with it, and they'll do real hard, dark vignettes. That works sometimes, but it's very, very dated, very, I guess probably late 90s. But it just, to me, doesn't do any real enhancement. And so I usually go about a -10 on the vignette. In this case, I think I can go 5. And you might even be able to go 20 here. Yeah, 20 sort of works. Now, the last thing, and I just simply forgot to do this when I sent it into, before I sent it to Photoshop, is I want these two portions of the image to stand out. I want the eye to be drawn to it. The eye's already drawn to this because it's the brightest spot in the frame. So I am going to place a radial filter over both of these areas. Now, when you do that, the default mode in Lightroom is that you're going to change what's outside of the filter. In this case, we want to change what's inside. And so hit invert mask, and you'll see it darkened it. Now, I'm going to move this up, and I'm going to go to about 39 plus 0.39 in exposure, okay? I'm going to do the same thing over here. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a couple of more interest points that will draw the eye. And so when you do that, there is your finished image. And that is something that shows just the beauty of the marsh on a really nice sunrise. It gives you a lot of interest. That starburst of the sun really works well, and it's something anybody would love to have in their home. And so it's a real sellable image that has become one of the most popular images I've posted on my Facebook page in quite some time. All right, I appreciate you joining me. I invite you to join me on Facebook. Just look up Andy Crawford Photography and like my page, please. And you'll be able to keep up with all of my new images. You'll be able to keep up with new videos that I post. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you can join me at andycrawford.photography. Again, I appreciate you joining me, and see you next time.